Hi, everyone. I hope that you're all okay and well and not sick. And days are going well as well for you. So, this is Ayse from Mosaic Foundation. I am a recent graduate from CU as or from the Department of CID, which is Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Education. And I work as an instructional specialist at a community college in Colorado. It's been about, and I didn't say, let me introduce myself. So let me introduce myself. It's been about 2.5 years that we're in Colorado. Before that, we lived in Utah, Salt Lake City, and before that in Turkey, before that in Hong Kong, before that in Utah again. So we kind of wandered around in the world and then came to Colorado due to jobs. So today, as you know, we're going to talk about women in Islam. And I was talking to some of my friends in the community, saying that this is such a hard, but at the same time fun topic, I think. And I hope that you're going to like what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to share my screen now so that I can reach to uh, the presentation that we put together for you all. So let me show you the agenda first. Okay, so today we are going to talk about the spiritual aspect, the economic aspect, the social aspect, the political and legal aspect, and hijab, which is the scarf that I'm wearing right now. And lastly, question and answer. So if you have any questions on the way, please note them down so that we can address those before we finish. Okay, so the spiritual aspect. Women have the same human spiritual nature as men. So I was going through this slideshow before you all came, and I wanted to highlight this bigger one, the verse. And I did not create the jinn and mankind except to worship me. So as you might see, the Quran is approaching women as equal to men. So it's not separating them first. So the whole reason beyond the creation is explained as worship, and it doesn't say I created women to worship me more, or I created men to worship me more. It says I did not create the jinn and mankind, which is us, which is all of us, except to worship me. So this is one of the verses that I like a lot whenever I have some inner thoughts about the women in Islam topic myself too, because as you realize, we're all equal. And then it's always approaching women and men together. It never separates them or divides them as two different things, two different kinds. So every soul will be held and pledged for its deeds, which is again the same idea. Every soul, it's not man or women, but it's every soul. Whoever works righteous, man or woman, and has faith, very like to. Okay. So, according to Islam, women is not responsible for the fall of man. And I think I was showing you another slide, but because I wasn't able to click on save, I'm going to show this one first because this is the former one or the previous one. So, anyways, so the movement is not responsible for the fall of man. I think this is one of the distinctions between Christianity and the religion Islam. The Quran does not blame women the pair with perfect equity. So both are equally guilty of the sin they committed, and both were equally punished as or with the expulsion from the garden, and both were forgiven when they repent, according to Islamic point of view. And as the spiritual aspect goes on, here we are. So we were just saying that how we are equal in terms of obligations, even though in practices there is some differences, such as if you just gave a birth to a child, or if you're having your private days, you don't have to pray or fast. or if you're not earning or making your own money, you don't have to share, or you don't have to donate at 40%, not 40%, 2% of your um, earnings with anybody else. But other than that, these are practical issues that are different for men and women. But in terms of obligation, we are all equal, or we are equal to men. So men who surrender unto Allah, and women who surrender, and men who believe, and women who believe, and men who obey, and women who obey. So this is a verse, another verse that shows that women and men are stated together, and as you see, they're not divided, or they're not given less or more obligations from each other. So, and the obligations require both of them to obey God. So when it comes to the Prophet Muhammad and how he represents, or how he is giving the message about the women, whosoever has a daughter and he doesn't bury her alive, does not insult her, and does not favor his son over her, God will enter him into paradise. So this is taken from Ibn Hanbal. uh, so it starts with a striking point: whosoever has a daughter and he doesn't bury her alive. That was kind of that not kind of, but that was a tradition, pre-Islamic tradition in the society that Islam was brought by God. And people would bury their daughters, and the daughters were believed to another mouth to feed. So basically, it was too much. They were too much on the family. So till a certain age, they would bury their daughters alive. So this verse, first of all, is saying, not verse, but Sunnah or Hadith, Prophet Muhammad saying, is definitely saying or condemning the fact that you just can't bury your daughter just because she is a female. And then it goes on, doesn't insult her or doesn't favor his son over her. So this is another tradition or custom that pre-Islamic people had in their society, to favor their sons just because they were men or male. So he is openly ordering people and Muslims and believers, whoever has a daughter, you can't bury your daughter. You can't insult her or favor your son. And then he is giving, the surprise, or the message, saying that you will enter into paradise if you do not do those things. Whosoever supports two daughters till they mature, he and I will come in the day of judgment as this. And he pointed with his two fingers held like this. So in Islam, of course, we value all prophets, but Prophet Muhammad, being the prophet of Islamic faith, uh, Muslims would love to be with him, right, in paradise. This is another nice thing from him, to encourage people to treat their daughters in a fair way. And he's saying that whoever supports their daughters is going to be with me on the judgment day, just like this, just like very close. So, in social life, what do we have as a right, as women? The right of females to seek knowledge is not different from that of males. Prophet Muhammad said, seeking knowledge is mandatory for every Muslim. And as you might remember, if you were able to participate in Gülsüm's class, so the first verse in Quran is, read. So it's an order. It's another obligation, and it's the first obligation actually from God to us to read. So we have to seek knowledge. And in terms of seeking knowledge, it's not stated as men can seek it wherever they want, or however they want, how much ever they want, but it's also the females. So it doesn't divide us. It's all humanity. We have to seek for knowledge, and it's a mandatory, it's an obligation in Islam. So it's is for every Muslim. Whoever is identifying themselves as Muslim, they have to be able to seek the knowledge. And then the Quran repeatedly commands all readers to read, to recite, to think, to contemplate, as well as to learn from the signs of Allah, how creature is created and why and hows and the links and the communication even. So, as a female who identifies herself as a Muslim, while I was reading this presentation, I was like, is this even a question? I cannot think about a world where I don't seek the knowledge, right? I'm a teacher. It doesn't depend on the gender. It's an obligation, and I think it's like the core understanding of Islam uh, and encouragement. In fact, the very first revelation to Prophet Muhammad was concerned with knowledge. As I told you before, Gülsüm's presentation stated that the Quran is starting with the verse read. Lectures of Prophet were attended by audiences of both men and women, right? And by the time of Prophet's death, there were many women scholars. So they were all educated, and nobody was able to take the right to educate themselves from them. Actually, they were um, encouraged. And in the marriage, the Quran clearly indicates that marriage is sharing between the two halves of society, and then its objectives, beside perpetuating human life, are emotional well-being and spiritual harmony. Its bases are love and mercy. So this is another nice verse from Quran. And among his signs is this, that he created for you mates from among yourselves, and you may dwell in tranquility with them. And he has put love and mercy between your hearts. Verily, in that are signs for those who reflect. So, I like this because it is, or the love is shown as the sign of God as well. And I think it's touchy and romantic, to be honest. So the marriage as a constitution, if you take it, is built with two halves. Or I want to approach this as a female, two wholes together, right? But when it says two halves of the society, because we are two partners in the society, so it's taking it as an equal partnership again. It's not lowering either sides. What can women have as right in marriage in Islam? So the female has right to accept or reject marriage proposals, right? Nobody forced me or pushed me to marriage in the first place, starting with. Marriage is an institution which is recommended for many reasons, for varied reasons, but it's not an obligation. So it's up again to us, is according to us, if you would like to accept or reject marriage and the proposals, of course. And we have to, they have to have our permission for the validity of a marital contract according to Prophet's teachings. So it cannot be done deal between families or parents or whoever, saying that now they're husband and wife. To make it so, they have to have both sides permissions. So, and I have a right to retain my family name, and I don't know why I didn't do it. I don't know, I just signed the paper. It was such a rush moment, I guess, or happy moment for me. I didn't think about it, but looking back, I'm like, maybe I should have. But I have the right to retain the family name. um, Full right to her mahr, which is marital gift. So according to Islamic faith, you have to be able to ask for marital gift from your spouse, and you have full right to this money or whatever you demanded as your marital gift from your spouse. Right to be satisfied by her husband. So it's not just about the husband, it's about the woman also. So that both parts, again, as we stated in the earlier presentation or the slide, we are two halves, or we are two wholes, two partnership, two partners, equal partners in this. The husband is responsible for the maintenance, protection, and overall leadership of the family, though, within the framework of consultation and kindness, right? And we have a right to divorce her husband. This is another, I think, misunderstood subjects whenever we talk about, women rights and marriage in Islam. People might think that we don't have the right to divorce the husband, but we do. We can divorce the husband, even though divorce itself is not very encouraged, and it should be with um, depending on serious reasons. We have a right to divorce the husband as well as choosing him. So, but consort with them in kindness, for if you hate them, it may happen that you hate a thing wherein God has placed much good. And Prophet Muhammad, to this, to the verse, or saying this as a parallel to the verse, the most perfect believers are the best in conduct, and best you are those who are best to their wives. And I command you to be kind to women. So, while I was reading, I was smiling at the same time, because I felt like, these are all for men, like messages for men, that they have to be kind and nice to their spouses. So Fethullah Gulen, as you know, the scholar that would inspire lots of people, and Mosaic Foundation, said, for us, a woman is a part of a whole, a part of that renders in the other half useful. We believe that when the two halves come together, the true unity of a human being appears. When this unity doesn't exist, humanity doesn't exist, nor can prophethood, sainthood, or even Islam, right? So it is deep, when we talk about unity. But again, it is putting these two together as unity so that the humanity could exist. So the Quran, let's say, if spouses cannot agree on something, or they want to finish or end their marriage, the Quran encourages couples to resolve the problems privately in the spirit of fairness and probity. Under no circumstances does the Quran encourage, allow, or condone family violence or physical abuse. So there is no word, no verse, no part of Quran or Prophet Muhammad's tradition is saying that you can have violence or physical abuse in marriage. So as a mother, and it doesn't, again, you're going to see that even though, mothers are given a special place in both hadith and verses in Quran, or sayings in Prophet Muhammad and verses in Quran, it takes them together again as parents. So Islam considers kindness to parents next to the worship of God. So it says, show gratitude to me and your parents to me is your final destiny. And we have enjoined upon man to be good and to his parents. His mother bears him in weakness upon weakness, it states. And one of the sayings in Prophet's life is, the paradise is underneath the feet of mothers. So again, even mothers are given a special message, I guess. They are still considered as parents. So there is no division in terms of being kind to them, being generous to them, being helpful and support to them. And it is considered as another kind of worship to God. So the economic aspect. So in the 19th century, European women did not have the right to own their own property. But in Islam, starting from 600s, we did have that right. We can have our own property, and we do not have to share it unless we want with anybody else throughout our lives. In Britain, perhaps the first country to give women some property rights, laws were passed in 1860s, known as Married Women Property Act. And in Germany, the wife was denied any control over her property until 1922 by civil law. While these things are happening in the modern world, we had all these rights to have our own property and gain our own property in Islam. So when we look at, I think they're kind of connected with the social life. The economic aspect, we have a right to possess personal property. We can buy, sell, mortgage, lease without anyone's permission being required. If it is ours, it's ours. But if you want to, contribute to our marriage with whatever we have, we can. So it's part of the right to, right? I have a right to share, or I have a right to keep it to myself. So Islam doesn't order me to share with my spouse in any situation. Whatever men earn, they have a share of that, and whatever women earn, they have a share in that. In Islam, the wife's property and earnings are under her full control and for her use alone. No matter how rich the wife might be, she is not obliged to act as a co-provider unless she herself voluntarily chooses to do so. And this is what could be seen or observed, I think, in most traditions or cultures, but it's not an obligation that you have to share. And then we have a right to seek employment, inheritance, and financial security as well. So in terms of political aspect, Islam provides women with right to vote, participation in political affairs. Women can be in leadership positions, and in Mosaic, especially, for example, it's a good example. You can see women in leadership positions, participation in public affairs, and during the Caliph Omar ibn al-Khattab, a woman argued with him in a mosque. She was actually questioning one of his orders, as far as I could remember, but I could be wrong. But she was questioning, and she was saying or telling to the audience or to the crowd about her question loudly. So, even from this scene, we can understand the position of women in Islam, even back in when it started. Omar, as the leader of the state, said that the woman is right and Omar is wrong. So you can see the equality here, that the women's role is, she could raise her hand, ask the question, and she was affirmed that she was the correct one. So she had a equal position. Okay. So rights of women in Islam. In general, equality of reward for their deeds, the right and duty to obtain education, and as we stated, there's no division for men or women, especially seeking the knowledge. It's both of us, ours obligation to seek for knowledge, to right to obtain provisions from her father or brothers until she gets married, and the right to have their own independent property. And again, they don't have to share or give a share to that one if they don't want to. The right to provisions from husband for all her needs and more. The right to work to earn money if they need it or want it, and to keep the money to themselves, to express their opinion and to be heard, negotiate marriage terms of her choice, and obtain divorce from her husband, and can have custody of their children after divorce, and more. And again, if you have any questions, please note them down so that we can come back to these if needed. In Islam, men and women are equal but different, of course, in creation, right? We have different creations in terms of biology, for example, abilities, roles and duties. And for roles and duties, I want to add this could be impacted by the cultures that we are shaped in. Islamic dress. So again, yes, hijab is for women, or the apparent hijab is for women, but you're going to see in a minute that even for this one, we are not separated as men and women. Both men and women are expected to dress in a way which is modest and dignified according to Islamic faith. And we have to appear different from each other to maintain our identities. And the traditions of male and female dress found in some Muslim countries are often expression of local customs. So say the colors that we pick, the way that we wrap it around, or the way that we put it on our heads, or the way that we might prefer to wear certain garments of clothing. These are all expression of local customs, because the core, the foundation idea is us being modest and dignified. So say to the believing man that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty. And say to the believing women they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty, that they should not display their beauty and ornaments except what ordinarily appear thereof, that they should draw their veils over their bosoms. As you see, it's not described in a very implicit way. That's why we're saying that, what you're seeing could be an expression of local traditions as well. Islamic dress for women. In reference to women, the Quran and the Hadith, or sayings of Prophet Muhammad, have mandated various rules in regards to behavior and appearance. So it's not just about the appearance. As Muslims, in general, for men and women, we have to be modest, we have to be humble, we have to be dignified, right? This wasn't to restrict women, but it was to provide a virtuous society where sexual attraction is not the main obsession. When it comes to hijab, though, it's the covering, right? The hijab, but why? And benefits. So the word itself comes from the Arabic word hajaba, meaning to conceal or hide from view. So hijab is the modest covering of the head and body of Muslim women. And clothing is, as we stated, is just one part of it. It's also behavior, manners, speech, whatever you do, the way that you are being in the society. Women who wear the hijab do not find it inhibiting, impractical, or interfering. But why? The first thing, because it's Allah's will. It's Allah's wish. O Prophet, tell your wives and daughters and the believing women to draw their outer garments around them, and when they go out or among men, that's better, in order they may be known to be Muslims and not annoyed. And again, it's to maintain a society where the sexuality is not the main obsession. So some benefits. So we please Allah and God. I mean, God earns blessing from wearing it. So that's the main thing. It's from Him. So we are preferring to do it, and purifies her heart and mind, attains nobility, and protect honor. By covering the beauty, she is evaluated for her intelligence, skills, instead of looks and sexuality. I think this talks to me much, in a society where women's intelligence could be still questioned. I think, as women, as a woman, as a Muslim woman, I would like to be known and evaluated with my intelligence and skills instead of my sexuality. Many women who cover our field with dignity and self-esteem, and are happy to be identified as a Muslim woman, and beautifies her inner and outer appearance, and expresses her independence and how she feels liberal. So this is the end of the slideshow. I think at this point I'm going to stop sharing. But if you ask me to go back to any slide, I can. Um, so I think it's question time. I'm sorry if I went too fast.
Ayse,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, this is Bobby.
Hi, Bobby. How are you?
Fine. That was great. Thank you so much.
Can everybody hear Bobby, or is it just me?
I don't know.
Everybody. I think everybody. Yeah.
Ayse, I want to know,
Mhm.
you must have different cultures, you
Yeah.
know, like Jews do,
Mhm.
because when I see women who wear a burqa,
Mhm.
I mean, and people tell me that when you wear a burqa, that you literally need to be afraid of your husband. And I don't know anything about that. But what's the culture where they ask you to wear a burqa and cover your entire face except your eyes?
So, there are lots of schools of Islam. And, this is, again, interpretation of how you approach to the verse, which is saying, tell your daughters and sisters and, Muslim women to cover themselves. So I think, first of all, it's an interpretation, a different interpretation. And it's a preference. And I cannot name specific cultures or countries right now who are, telling their people to do so. But I met some, American people or women who converted to Islam, apparently, at some point of their lives, and they were wearing burqa. So that was their approach. Or whenever they read the verse, they understood it that way, I think, for example. So I think it's a preference and interpretation how you are shaped in your own culture. But again, I cannot identify specific cultures at the moment.
Okay.
But for the fear factor, I don't think that it is, again, there for a male. I never, or this is maybe my point of view, I never wear my hijab for any man, or, for the fear of man, or for the obligation of man. I do it for God, or seeking his deeds, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think it's the fear factor.
Okay.
It sounds like a preference.
Good. And just one other question. In every religion, there are issues regarding gay and lesbian people.
Mm-hmm.
How does the Muslim faith deal with a person if they do happen to be a gay or lesbian?
Um, it's a hard one to, I think, answer. But the foundational idea of Islam, it's being inclusive. So if you announce yourself as a believer, if you announce yourself as a Muslim, I cannot say, oh, you're not Muslim anymore, just because I don't like you. Does it make sense? Or I can, for example, you're not praying 5 times a day, even though it's a pillar of Islam, right? Or you're not fasting during Ramadan, but it's a pillar of Islam. So in these cases, I cannot say, just because you're not doing it, or you're not Muslim anymore. I am not in the judgment position for this kind of situations. So I think in terms of LGBTQ, I cannot say that it's not a sin, but on the other hand, I cannot judge you based on your actions. It's not my position to judge you. So this is the Islamic view. It's between you and God, or creator, or whatever you name him with. I cannot interfere there. I think it's a special space between you and him. I don't have any space in there as a servant of God. I think this could be a valid Islamic approach, but there is no discrimination. in terms of, people's qualifications. If you're qualified for a position or something, you're still qualified. No one is judging. No one should judge you according to whatever privacy you have. Yep. I hope that I was able to, because, again, this is a hard one, but at the same time, easy one, I think, for me. And this is my point of view, how I approach to my own faith too, right? I just can't take away people's right to believe and call God Allah or whatever they want. So I am not interfering in that space. I did not create those people. God is the only one who can, talk to them. Yeah. Any other questions? Really? Okay.
Sister?
Oh, yay. Okay.
Hey.
Okay.
Jennifer.
Sorry for being late.
It's fine.
That one via chat.
Hello. Hi, Linda, I think, right?
Can you hear me? No, I'm Margaret.
Oh, Margaret. Okay. Yes, Margaret, I can hear you.
I just wonder if your interpretation of Islam is more like what it is here in the American culture, because there are major differences in other countries with major restrictions. And I wonder how Allah's philosophy covers all these different cultures.
That's a good question or a good point. I don't know if it is Americanized, but again, there are lots of parts that make us, and religion is one of them. Culture is one of them. Maybe one of the hugest ones. In terms of shaping one's identity. So, as we're from Turkey, and Turkey being a democratic country and secular country, it could be an impact. You could be right, and the United States is another democratic country, so we could align, or our cultures can align and go parallel levels. So that could be it. But for the rest of the question, again, the foundational idea, or the core idea, I think, is the fact that God is the one who is above all of us and the absolute judge. I do not know if other schools, how they interpret, but this is the foundation that wouldn't change for anyone. Yeah. This is, I don't know if I was able to, but this could be, I think, my takeaway.
So I just had, hello, Ayse, it's Jennifer.
Hi, yes, hi, Jennifer, how are you?
Thank you so much for hosting. I just wanted to make a comment also on the dress, which is that dress codes are common in so many cultures and so many places that I think it's worth taking a moment to recognize that. So for example, if my husband and I go to the public pool, he might have on shorts. If I were to show up in just shorts and not cover the top of me, I would definitely have difficulties, not only from a social point of view, but I would probably be asked to leave the pool. So it's worth noting that on all levels and in all cultures, there are norms, and it is not unusual to find a difference between men and women. And so I think that's something just for us to remember as we think about that.
Yeah, thank you. Get very valid, and nice point. Thank you for saying it loud. Yeah.
This is Stephanie, and I just sent an inquiry into what I thought was the chat group, but it was unfortunately just to Ishmael.
Okay.
And my question is, what are the thoughts of Muslim women living in the West wearing the hijab, about the clothing of women in the West. And I am not so much thinking about a Britney Spears and, you know, bikinis that barely cover what ought to be covered. I'm thinking about the fact I'm sitting here in a, for Western understanding, perfectly acceptable T-shirt, which is probably very revealing to you. And so what do you think, or not just you, but what do you also hear about your fellow Muslimas about women wearing business suits where the skirt only goes to the knee, jeans and T-shirts, things that are completely normal for us? Are they a matter of curiosity or are they a matter of judgment?
So at the beginning, I told you that I lived in Hong Kong, or I used to live in Hong Kong too. So I made lots of Saudi Arabian or Arabic friends there. So I'm mentioning the name of the country because, we are culturally, might be culturally different, but we follow the same religion. But among them, there were ladies who did not prefer to wear the hijab that I'm wearing today. So I don't think it's a very different, even in our community or in our families, we have sisters or we have mothers who wouldn't wear the hijab, but still, make connections or have relationships. We do have a very close friend who is not wearing the hijab, but her daughter is wearing the hijab or started wearing hijab at the age of 15. So this could be, so I don't think it's very different from whatever other people are thinking about, each other as ladies. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, fair enough.
I could be looking at where you got it. I could be asking that, did you get it from Banana Republic or, so in terms of fashion, I could be, but I don't think other than that, people would think wrong things or, have judgmental thoughts about each other. Because it's a preference at the same time, right? Yes, it's an obligation, but at the same time, something that you can prefer, even the way that you want to wear it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So if you would like to appear on YouTube, you can ask like this. But if you don't, I'm getting the comments because we're on YouTube. You can ask them privately, or you can ask them in chat the questions. Otherwise, we're on YouTube. Okay. For viewers. Did I make sense to you? I hope that. Yeah. Do we have any other questions or comments? I'm sad that we're unfortunately losing the chance to meet face to face, but one day we're gonna have that chance, and then we're gonna chat more, I think. Jennifer, do you have a question? I think Ismail, could you please unmute Jennifer, or can I do it? I don't know if I can do it. Okay. Yes, Jennifer.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I hope you won't mind if I just add another comment, which is I think it's also worth, as we think about this and as we're contemplating on questions, to remember that Muslim culture is a part of American culture. So we have a wide spectrum of cultures here in the United States. And so, as I find myself thinking about this and thinking about questions and speaking to other people in this world, it sometimes can be tempting to say that this is our American culture and then there's this other culture. Mm-hmm. And so this is always such a good moment to remember that American culture is inclusive. It is inclusive of Muslim culture and of all of these other cultures that we might be learning about. Mm-hmm. I think that is an interesting thing. It often it sort of shifts the question a little bit and allows us to look at this as a spectrum of richness that's brought to the table, as opposed to, this is the way we do it and then there's this other way. and just thinking about coming back to the dress too, it's really interesting to think about Britney Spears, right?
Yeah.
We collectively in this room might look at that and go, yeah, that's not okay. I mean, this normal here. So Britney Spears falls out of the normal. And then there's this. And so that's already thinking about us, we're already making an assessment on what qualifies as normal and what does not qualify as normal. If this was a group of Britney Spears fans, they might all call that normal. And so it also helps to think about it again in terms of a spectrum, of differences, and so many of them are cultural. Even within the United States, there are many cultural ways of addressing something, and that's just dress. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. Ismail, can you see Peg Johnson?
Yeah, I have a question. Oops, yeah.
Yeah.
And I understand all of this, and I appreciate all the understanding of it. But the questions that people will ask is, well, how come in Iran everybody has to wear the hijab, and I think more than that, be covered? How come in Afghanistan people are required to wear the burqa? Are they not Muslims, or is that just? I understand culture, but I think it's also maybe about government and politics, and that requires that in some countries versus the U.S. or versus some of these other more liberal ones.
So there are Muslims, as long as they identify themselves as Muslims, but it's totally politics. Again, where I'm from is, originally from is Turkey, and, it's a secular country. It identifies itself as a democratic and secular country where anyone can wear or not wear whatever they want. They can, follow their lifestyle. But I cannot talk for them, right? But it's politics in their countries that require them to follow some restrictions, I guess. On my, basic knowledge or understanding is this way for Iran and Afghanistan. Yep. Because I did not read their history. I seriously don't, feel like an expert on both countries or either countries. So there's a question, when I mention God, sometimes I refer him as he, him as he. Is there anything in Islam that sees God with female or male aspects? That's a good question. No, God is genderless in Islam. But, according to translation and English, I think my brain is, while I'm talking in English, it works in English. That's why I refer him with he, but I do not mean with the gender he or with the gender man. Yeah, I'm just using my, translation skills, I guess. And in Quran translation, it is he as well. But if you look at translation in Turkish, because we do have another subject of the verb, not just he or she, but, genderless one, we use that one for God. We don't use he or she, but we use basically it, but it's not it. Yeah. Yep. What are some expectations of children near to adulthood, boys and girls? Expectation. I think when we say expectation, it's more like a culture again, and it depends on the cultures and wherever you are. Expectation-wise, I think I expect them to be respectful and inclusive and kind people. There is no specific, I think, expectation. But in terms of religion or faith, they can start practicing 5 times a day or fasting. So, the obligation starts with the puberty or how mature you feel, or if you can differentiate between right and wrong. Um, these kind of expectations can be seen, I think, with, near ages to adulthood. Not like, my son who is just 8. Of course, he can differentiate between right and wrong, because, he is going to be punished by being taken away his toys for half an hour, or not playing the games that he wanted if he's not following something, similar to bar mitzvah, bar mitzvah, rite of passage to adulthood. If it's, I don't know if it's a celebration or some kind of event that you hold in Judaism. I think yes, right? We don't have that one in Islam. We don't have that tradition. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we should have had. Now I'm thinking about starting another tradition. Yeah. No, we don't. But I think it's a nice culture too. In some Mexican families that I see from my students or hear their stories, the age of 16, they have a huge celebration. So to me, it's, not just faith-based, but it's more, it could be tradition too, cultural-based tradition. Yeah. It's so we're getting used to this, because I always or for 2 weeks now I'm giving my classes online, but it's still feel awkward when there's this silence. So if we do not have any questions, let's end this here. But if you still have some questions, I think you can still send them to Ismail. And I think we can talk about them. But before we all leave, I want to remind you about the next week. So we're going to talk about Muslim versus non-Muslim relationships with Ismail. Ismail is going to be the one who is going to give the lecture. I hope I was able to convey the information, enough information. So thank you all for being with us tonight.